Well, hello there, people. Welcome back to my channel. And today I wanted to do a little bit of different and difficult type of video. At least for me, it's difficult. I wanted to do some kind of buyer's guide, or how I like to call it, a heads up guide. Because I have to say, or call it a heads up guide, because doing a buyer's guide would be very difficult to do, as I'm not a master of the editing skills thing when it comes to videos. So I will have to do this very randomly, and I will take you through the car and try to point out as many of the known potential faults to these cars as possible. I mean, so when buying a new car, either a 500e or a Volkswagen Beetle, you should check the car thoroughly, and that is the rule of thumb. And it really doesn't matter what type of car it is, you should check it thoroughly, like back to front, upside down, inside, under, like everywhere, and make sure that everything works, and make sure it has the right appearance that you are looking for. I mean, if you don't bother a rusty car, then the rust issues doesn't matter. But this being an enthusiast car, I do reckon that most people that are out on the hunt for these do want a good condition car, and that is what I wanted to try and point out in this video, how you can spot a good car and at least avoid the worst things that can potentially be an issue on this type of car. But like I said, it really doesn't matter what type of car it is, but as long as we're, in this case, talking about the 500e, I will try in no particular order to point out some issues that you should be aware of. And you can see that I've taken off some stuff in the engine compartment here, and that is because it doesn't look like this when you open the hood. It does have an air filter box, but I did a previous video and that ended up like 45 minutes. So I try and do another one to cut it down a little bit. But it is a massive thing to cover. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be said in a way, so I wish I could edit and make a proper video for you, because I do have some knowledge. I'm not saying I do know everything, but after owning this car for 3 years, and I also been in the car enthusiast world for a long time, I do know how to look out for things and do know what to look out for. But when it comes to these 500es, you can see obviously the engine bay is pretty much cramped. So the first thing you will want to avoid is oil leaks, and that is just a thing that's pretty much a natural thing that you want to avoid, especially in an engine bay like this. Working on or fixing oil leaks on these M119 engines isn't a fun thing, so you want to do everything you can to avoid that. And the most important parts to check is the cam covers, which is an easy fix, so to speak. But at least we're going to go through and show you how to check for these if they leak. And you should have a mirror like this, so you can get to all the places where you can't see just by looking at it. You need to check like all the way around in the back. You will also have to check the front here. Use your light and light up this area here to see if you can see any oil leaks. The magnets often leak, and it can also leak from the cover behind here. So just make sure you check all the outsides of the engine to spot oil leak, and then eventually you will have to fault find where it comes from. Front crank seal, rear crank seal is also a thing you definitely want to avoid leaking. So also the tandem pump up front here, this is the reservoir, the tandem pump is down there, but you will have to light up this area to see if you can see any leaks. Coolant leaks is also a thing. The water pump on these pre-facelifts can be a massive job to replace because of the need to remove the harmonic balancer sitting down there. And that harmonic balancer can be stuck. It was on my car and I had a hard time replacing this water pump. It took me almost 7-8 hours to replace that water pump. And that is when I'm putting it the best way. Like, I think it was even more. I think it was 9-10 hours. But anyways, coolant leaks and oil leaks, you will have to make an effort to really find out how much of the leaks are severe, so to speak. Other than that, it's all about the small details, like hoses, connectors, all the tanks. You should inspect them for cracks. Coolant hoses, breather hoses, like these are not very super expensive, but if you're going to replace them, it will cost you a bit of money and some labor. And another thing that I have to mention before we go ahead, giving this kind of advice is also very depending on, do you do your own work? Do you have to take the car to a workshop to get it fixed? Is it an enthusiast car? Is it a project car? All these things are things that matters when you consider buying a car like this. So yeah, I just have to say that. Next thing is to inspect the upper wiring harness. It's a known fact that the engine wiring harness on these cars do deteriorate. And the most easy way to determine if it's bad or not is to take the first obvious sensor or connection, and that's the one up front here. Peel back the cover here and have a look at the wiring. If you can see any copper wire, then most likely the rest of the wiring harness that goes here, and to the injectors are toast. So you will have to replace it, and these are still available as far as I know. Another way to determine if it's been replaced is to locate a Delphi sticker located here on the side of the so-called CAN box, which, by the way, has all the ECUs lined up in here. This is also the diagnostic port. Looking like this, it's a 38-pin connector. So you want to see a Delphi tag like this. It also has a production date on the side here. If I remember correctly, it's like 2003. This top one is what date the original one was that it supersedes. So it's April 91, I think. That's like the original from this car, or the date from the original, or what the parts number exceeds, or how I want to say it. I really don't know, but at least this one is from 2003, November, I think. Other than that, you will have to inspect the area here to see if all the drains are open and not clogged, and generally just have a look at the general condition of the car. And because the condition of the engine bay often tells you how the car has been maintained. Of course, if it's a flipper car, the seller can easily have hosed it down and make it look good, but in general, a good clean condition engine bay is a good indicator if the car's been well maintained or not. Like, for an example, clean brake fluid is a very good sign of a well maintained car. Even though it's a very easy fix, it's a very good indicator of how it's been maintained. Also on these, make sure you check the fuse box. You don't want to see a lot of corrosion here, so that's the only thing you can do actually. Even make sure there's no blown fuses, because one of the things that it's very important is to check that everything works. And that is very important when it comes to the engine itself. So you should check the car from cold, so you can do a cold startup. These cars can suffer from timing chain issues, especially in cars that come from hotter climates. The timing chain guiding rails can deteriorate and break. So in that case, you will then have a rattling sound on startup, especially when cold. And it all depends on what is going on inside the timing chain and stuff. But have a listen on the car from startup when it's cold, and drive the car until it's hot. So you will see the temp gauge inside the car at the correct level, the oil pressure level would be correct, and all that stuff. So to check the timing chain, you will have to remove both cam covers. You shall also check and remove the lower oil pan, and of course that's a thing you can't do when it's not your car. So you will have to do a cold startup to at least determine if it does have a rattling sound or not. So let me first just take down the hood here, because I don't want to forget it when we take the car up in the air, because I will have to hurry up here. I do have only 40 minutes. So yeah, where to go now? Yeah, the insides or the interior is very nice in these cars, I think. So it's very important to find a car with a good interior. You don't want to see cracked leather and stitching that's torn apart, and it should be quite soft. Obviously, if the car's been used, and they all have for the most part, you will see some like it's not as soft on the driver's side as in the back. I know, so it's like you have to take everything with a bit of grain of salt. Unless you find a car that's like 500 miles and it's practically new, you will risk seeing interiors that are not like perfect, but you should look for the best one possible. Because finding a good replacement seats and interior parts is not that easy. And especially when it comes to the wood in these cars, you should pick the car with the best looking wood panels. It's not anything that's so frustrating to see a cracked wood panel inside a car like this. So I know it's a personal preference, but it's the thing to consider, definitely. So check all the door cards, seats, the roof lining, or the roof, what's it called? Roof lining. That's not sagging. That's often a problem with the cars that has been lived in a hotter climate, and then they often like sag down and stuff like that. So that's not pretty. So inside the car, the only thing that separates this car from standard 124 is basically I can't remember if it's the 260 kilometers an hour speedometer, but I don't think there's a lot actually. I have to admit that I'm really not sure. But anyways, what's important here is to check that every button and every function in the car works, even the AC and stuff like that. It's very annoying and very costly to repair all those small things, because it can lead to, say if the Windows doesn't work, you really don't know what's wrong. It can be a fuse, it can be a switch, but you don't know. So make sure everything works beforehand, so you can get the right impression of the car. And what is also important is on startup, that is that everything in the instrument cluster lights up, especially the ASR warning triangle and the ASR indicators down there. And then you start it up, and then every light should go out like this. And just make sure that the turn signals work, the lighting in the instrument cluster works, like the indicators there for the high beams, parking brake, all that stuff. And make sure the indicator on the switch works for the fog lights and stuff like that. These switches are heated rear window. These are the folding headrest. Let's see if they work. Now they don't work. I actually had a problem with these, and I did fault find it yesterday, and because I did a video yesterday, and I found a faulty magnet for the headrests, and it did work, but then it didn't work. But I did have the magnet out, and I found it to be defective. But when you knock it, or when you touch it, it starts to work. So that just shows you that it is important to check all functions. And we can check the rear screen or rear window blind. Like that. So that's how it is. And rear lights in the roof. Make sure these works. Heated seats. It's a two-step thing. Make sure the fan works. AC is off. AC is on. AC is off. Make sure it blows cold air. If you do have a temp gauge, it should be down to 7 Celsius around that when it's on, when it blows cold. Also, make sure this important feature works. The sunroof. And that is very important because you don't want to deal with a broken sunroof on these cars, especially when you just got it. So make sure you know before you buy it. Also check the tilt function. And that's about it for what to check inside here. You can also check the electrical seats. And the it also has an electronic adjustable steering column. Make sure that one works. And then you can turn off the ignition and then you can go out. So that leads me to check another thing when it comes to rust before we take it up in the air. This is the battery compartment panel or compartment area. Make sure you remove the battery and check this area for rust on the underside. It's a very common place for these cars to rust, especially the European ones. And when it comes to rust on the outside, it's pretty self-explanatory. What you see is what you get. You will have to inspect the special parts like the rear fender liners or the rear arches. The front fenders are 500e specific, so make sure they're not rusty. It's all very self-explanatory, I think. So I don't want to spend too much time on like pointing out like where a car can rust. What you see is what you get. So make sure you just do a good visual on the body. And on the body, it also is a couple of things that's very important, and that is the headlights. The headlights on these cars are 500e and E500 specific, so make sure that the lenses and reflectors are in good condition. I think the pre-facelift headlights are not longer available, so make sure they're working as they should and that they are clear and have a nice look to them, like these. You can see they're very much shiny. They are brand new from a couple of years back. So these are obviously the E500 ones because my car has a facelifted appearance, even though it is a pre-facelift car. The fog lights are SL R129 specific, so they are pretty much easily obtainable. So then let's move on to the underside. So please bear with me. Dum, 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 dum. So before we go ahead, I just want to point out a couple of things. Like any other Mercedes of this era, make sure that the spring cup, this one, is not rusted here. They always rust, even the 210s and 201s and 124s, they all rust here. So make sure you check the wheel wells for rust. And also, when you're at it, check the steering and the suspension for play. Most of the components here in the front suspension are 129 SL specific, so they're a bit more expensive than your average 124 parts. So just make sure you don't have any excessive play when rocking the wheels. And if you do have the early Brembo calipers on your car, if it's an early 500e, you will most likely see these aluminum calipers with the star logo on. And these are made out of aluminum, and the pistons inside tend to stick when they're now getting older. So make sure that the brakes doesn't stick when you roll them like this. And on the back side here, these are the shocks for the SLS suspension, the self-leveling suspension system. Just make sure you don't have any leaks here. And what you would like to see is brand new ones like these. Just making you envious. No, I'm just trying to point out everything here. Also, when it comes to wheels, it's cool if it comes with original wheels, but make sure that the wheel or the tire thread and the wheels are in good condition no matter what type of wheel are on the car. And the area that I pointed out in the trunk was this area. This is the outside of the battery compartment box area, and this was totally rusted out on my car. I did a video, so you can go back and have a look in the video collection, so to speak. This part is no longer available, so if you do find any rust here, you should give it a thorough check and determine how bad it is, because this is a massive job. You either have to find a good used part, you have to fabricate a part, or you will have to replace the whole fender, the rear right-hand fender, to get this box here. So really check this area here. This area is also important. Just do the visual check. Also, when it comes to rust, check this area here. My car had rust here also, and on this side I have repaired it. I haven't made the best visual look to it, but at least there's no more rust. And this is a very common place for the 124s to rust, no matter what type of 124 it is. Also, these plugs, they rust around, so make sure you check the inside or the wheel wells in the rear especially. And when we're at it, you should inspect also the inside of the wheel well on this side. So you have to remove this plastic liner to check the inside wheel well, because they do rust where the indicator is, or where the headlight is fastened inside there. So that's just a quick tip. I try to remember everything here. When it comes to suspension, you should pay attention to how it sits, like the ride height. If it has a low ride height or a high ride height, that could indicate a problem with the SLS system. And what can be the problem is often the spheres that are inside here. That's the thing that's mounted with these two screws. You open the trunk and you lift up the trunk lining and stuff. You would see this in the spare wheel well. It's two like big balls, and they are like spheres that contains pressure, and that is part of the SLS system. And when they go bad, you have a bouncy, very hard riding car, or it feels like there's no shocks on it, basically. Also, check the hydraulic lines. Very important that these are not rusted out. It's very expensive to do the whole SLS system. This is the SLS valve. It can be stuck. It can also be leaky from the lines connected to it. This connecting rod can be stuck also. Make sure you can twist it a bit like this. Other than that, it's pretty much like straightforward. Check the springs, like on any other Mercedes. They tend to warp or crack the springs. Check them, check all the suspension components here, check all the arms, check the wheel bearing, check the drive shafts for cracks in the drive shaft boots. They're pretty much very good, these drive shafts. They're a lot beefier on the 500es than on your average 124. So you shouldn't have any problems with these braking, at least. Check the differential for leaks. It shouldn't be of any significant amount. If it's sweating a bit, it doesn't matter. But if it's leaking out of the outdrives, it should be of a concern. The diffs are very bulletproof as far as I know. I haven't had any problems with mine apart from it had been leaking, so I have replaced the seals. Massive job, or not a massive job, but it's very heavy and it's a heavy job. When it comes to exhaust system, that is the thing that's super expensive on these cars, so make sure that the exhaust system is intact. I had to replace this center muffler on my car, and I did get hold of an aftermarket one, which is supposedly a 500e one, but it did have some fitment issues, and I'm not very happy with it. So, but the original silencer there is so expensive that I couldn't afford it. It was just like, or I could maybe afford it, but I didn't see I couldn't justify it. It was ridiculously expensive. So I just tried a different route, so to speak. Other than that, it's just making sure that there's no rust. That's a lot of the things that you should consider or really be on the lookout for is rusty cars. So that's how it is. When it comes to transmission, again, oil leaks is the worst enemy. Like the oil leak is the 500e's worst enemy because of it being so cramped and it's not easy to fix oil leaks. So make sure the transmission doesn't have any oil leaks. Make sure it shifts nice. Make sure it doesn't have any flaring between when shifting gears. Basically take out the dipstick and sniff the oil. If it does smell like burnt clutch, well, it's a sign of a worn transmission at least. I'm not going to say worn out, but in some way that's what it is. It is worn out if it smells like burnt clutches. Suspension, make sure you check all the steering links, ball joints. Here are the Brembo calipers I told you about. If you do have these, make sure the wheels doesn't stick because these can get stuck. Check the idler arm, expensive part. It's an SL and 500e specific part, very expensive. Check the drag links, check the steering damper and all the suspension components. It's very important to do a proper suspension and brake check on these cars. So yeah, other than that, it's pretty much a car. Fuel pumps are under here. There are two of them. I think on the E500 it's only one, I think. I'm not too sure, but on the 500e it's two fuel pumps. Can take off this cover, fasten with one nut there and two nuts there and one nut there, and you can inspect the fuel pumps at least for corroded fuel lines and stuff like that. That is also a bit important to check the one-way valve or the return valve up there. Just make sure that every tube and connection and everything is like it should be. You shouldn't see any leaks of any kind here. I'm sorry for the poor filming here, but I'm trying to get me moving, so to speak. Yeah. Oh, steering box. Make sure it doesn't leak. Wiring harness. The lower one is a thing you will have to check, because it also deteriorates, and that is the thing with the blue thing there. You can see the wiring coming from upstairs and it goes down there on the side of the starter, and it goes all like, it goes on the back here. So I haven't bothered removing this for you, but you should check that wiring harness that goes to the starter, the generator, and the oil level pressure, oil level sender unit and oil pressure sender unit. And the NOx sensors also, they are located on the sides of, they're located right in front there. Can you see the wiring coming down on the side of the engine mount? All the way back there. You have to check those as well. There's two, one on each side. But when you take this off, you will be able to inspect the wiring harness a bit better. but you will see that when you take off that cover. So I think that is about it. I think I have to take down the car and do a little evaluation, a little summary, because now I feel I really have to summarize this. There's a lot of stuff, and yeah, just trying to shorten it down a bit. So yeah, are we there yet? So there we are. So now we got a little tour around the car. Hopefully I did manage to show you all the things that really comes to my mind, at least. And I think we covered it all. It is, if I'm gonna summarize, I think we can do it like the easy way. Check for rust, check for oil leaks, check that every electrical component works, check the car from startup or from cold startup, drive the car. Is it good to drive? That is obviously a thing that's easy to forget, but it's very important. Is the car good to drive? Is there something that you feel is not right? Does it really pull to one side? Does it shake when, and now I'm talking about the 500e, I'm not trying to mix up with other cars. I'm doing the 500e thing here. Does it shake when you run it? Because these cars are super smooth. So that's why I'm mentioning, like, is it shaking? Is it pulling to one side? Of course it can pull to one side if it's got a worn out suspension or steering components, or so that is, I don't know. I really don't want to mess it up now, because in some way I feel a bit happy with this video at this point. So I really don't want to mess it up by talking a bit about of everything. So, but it's very important that I get to mention all the stuff that at least I've experienced, and that is mainly the things like with the oil leaks, the engine wiring harness, making sure that everything works again, drive the car, especially from cold startup. Yeah, that's basically it. And of course, like also like the service history is somewhat important. Owner history, well, I don't know. I mean, the car is the car, whatever. I really don't know. I mean, service history is important, but in some ways not that important. I mean, the car is what it is, whatever the service history might be. If it has, and also like the mileage, you shouldn't be afraid of a higher mileage car. And you know, I can't explain like in miles and stuff, but like in kilometers, what we do in Europe and stuff. Like seeing a car with 300,000 kilometers of this type is no problem. I mean, there's a couple of cars in the States that are just past 1 million kilometers, or not a couple. There's one. But anyways, there's a lot of the cars that, if you look on online and see the cars for sale, there's a lot of these cars for sale in Germany that went like 300, 400, 500, 600,000 kilometers. At least it has been seen many times. So mileage isn't really a problem. What is important is the condition of the car, and that is what I've been trying to explain to you in this video. But I also did try to point out some things to be aware of, and that is, like I already said, I just have to point it out all the way. Oil leaks, coolant leaks, electrical issues, and rust. So, people, is that all? Do we have it all covered? I really think we have. I really do. I think I'll leave it with that. I really think this would be a sufficient heads up. And when we're talking about heads up, my headrest doesn't work. So that leaves me with some work. Or at least replacing that valve that I found to be faulty. So it just goes to show you that it is important to check all the small little details. And if you do consider buying a car like this to restore it, it's even more important to be aware of all the details. And because I can talk about my experience, I restored this car and I put a lot of hours into it, and it's still not like perfect. It is very good, but it still has some things that I really would like to do, and there's always stuff that you want to do if you're a perfectionist and an enthusiast. So take it from me, if you do buy this because of the enthusiast standpoint, be picky, buy the best car you can, and do a proper check of the car. Drive the car, do this inspection, do a fault code readout, make all the tests you can to find out the condition of the car, and I think you will be happy as hell getting one of these, because all faults aside, when these cars work as they should, and they often do, there's not a lot of faults to them apart from them being older, you know. So it's the age that makes them have these faults now, for the most part. When they work as they should, they're fantastic cars. The 124 is a timeless classic, and the 500e is the king of the wolves in sheep's clothing, I think, the true Autobahn racer, and it's a true modern classic car. Though it's a bit of a super cab, yeah, okay, I do get the point, but it's still a very awesome looking car with these widened fenders and the low stands and the fog lights in the bumper, and it really looks like a very nice car, and it is a 500e. Enough said. So I think I'll leave it with that, and I want to thank you very much for watching. I really hope you liked the video for what it is, and that you could get something out of this, and hopefully you will find the 500e that you're looking for. If you do have any questions, I would be happy to answer them in the comment section. And so, yeah, I'll leave it with that. Thank you again for watching, and hopefully I see you guys in my future videos. So until then, I hope you have a great day, and see you guys later. Happy motoring. Bye bye bye. See you.